Guess we're ready. Good evening, and thank you for being here. This is a nice crowd. Really appreciate it. We were going to hold this earlier in over the winter here, but we had that last snowstorm that we had to cancel it, and I'm kind of glad we did. What got us here? This is the Falmouth Community Forum on opiate abuse, and what got us here was back in the winter. Received a lot of phone calls. If you remember reading in the paper, we had overdoses. In fact, Falmouth had 12 in 4 months, and we had 2 deaths. And the phone calls that I was receiving was, Chief, what are you going to do about this? So what I told people was, when I spoke with them, was it's not just a law enforcement problem. It's a community problem. It's a health problem. Family problems, schools, churches, and it really is. By the time we deal with the individuals, it's too late. We arrest the drug dealers, we arrest the addicts, and we respond to the overdoses to try to revive them. So, talking with the school department and talking with the Prevention Partnership, we decided we'd have this forum, and we've got a great panel here. I'm just going to give you a quick introduction on everybody, and then I'm going to let them talk about what they do to prevent and assist in recovery. And I'm going to ask everybody to hold their questions to the very end. When everyone in the panel is done, some of those questions that you have might be answered. And if not, then we're going to allow you to ask those questions. So tonight, when everybody leaves, you'll have answers. And if you don't get the answers tonight, we'll get them for you. Seated right here at the very beginning of the table here is Sheriff Cummings from the Barnstable County Sheriff's Office. Seated next to him is Ray Tomasi, President CEO of Gosnell. Seated next to him is Dr. Bahari, Michael Bahari, retired pediatrician. And seated next to Dr. Bahari is Dr. Gary Simpson, Director of Clinical Services of the Falmouth Public Schools. And seated next to Dr. Bahari is Christoph Pinkowski. And at the very end is District Attorney Michael O'Keefe. So I'm going to start off with Dr. Gary Simpson. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself and what he does.
Okay, well, it's great to look out here and see so many folks out here this evening. I direct psychological services for the Falmouth schools, and I just wanted to make some general comments, and I know folks have a lot of questions, so I'll go quickly and I can address questions later from there. There are psychologists and counselors in all the buildings in Falmouth, the elementary schools, the middle schools, and the high schools. And I think for all those folks providing services in the schools, we've seen kind of this opiate crisis hit at all levels. At the high school, the psychologists and counselors have worked with getting kids to treatment. And in the elementary and middle schools, it's been more, the kids were impacted when their parents have issues, they're not able to provide care for their parents, et cetera. And we get involved because the kids will come and talk to the counselors, talk to the psychologists, and say, I went home this evening and there wasn't food, or there wasn't, they come to school dirty, et cetera. And that's when we get involved. A lot of what the psychologists and counselors do is try and identify and have relationships with students before it gets to that point, and try and identify those kids at a young age who are at risk, who need support, and provide that. And whether the counselors or psychologists meet with them, or the nursing staff meet with them on an ongoing basis, whether they direct them to services in the community or help their families, those are all the type of things that are provided. The other thing that I brought with me this evening is I brought a list that I'll leave up here at the end of this, but it lists for each one of the buildings the psychologists and counselors who are in the buildings, the nursing staff as well. And as the chief said, when we were talking before, this is really a community issue, and we really need parents and folks in the community to help us. And why I brought that list is just I'm hoping if folks see big changes in their children's behavior or in a friend's behavior, they're with different friends, their grades slip quickly, something like that, I want you guys not to hesitate at all to call the schools and just say, I'm concerned with about my son, my daughter. I just want you to check in with them briefly, and we're happy to do that. There's also, you guys are aware, there's VIPs in the schools or volunteering, and we had a panel after the school shooting. And many of the things I'd say tonight, I'd say hold up to that are similar in the response to the shooting, in that the more you can be involved in the schools, the more you can come in and mentor or spend some of your time with a young child who's having some difficulty, whose families are having some difficulties, we really significantly reduce the chances of them having issues later on or having issues with substances. So I just wanted to make those brief comments. I wanted to reassure you guys that there are a lot of services in the schools, and I don't want you to hesitate to contact the folks. And I will leave at the end of this panel, I'll leave these yellow sheets up here, and please come up and grab one just so you have that resource, and provide it to neighbors, friends as well. And if folks have any concerns as you're talking to neighbors, if they have concerns about their children, please tell them not to hesitate to contact the schools. Okay.
Thank you. Next, Ray Tomasi, please.
Thank you, Chief, and it's always good to do things like this in Falmouth, because Falmouth is a very responsive community. This afternoon I participated in a focus group of providers, treatment providers. The governor has asked the group to come together and make recommendations for addressing this crisis, which I might say at the outset is in its 16th or 17th year, a cycle that began in the late 90s with the introduction of OxyContin. It's very reassuring to us to see the community coming together. Would have been nice if it was 12 years ago, actually, but here we are. There are a lot of resources on the Cape. There are resources in many areas of the state, and I think one of the things that has become very apparent to me is that until we begin to redefine how we want to address this public health problem. Am I doing something, Chief? Am I?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know on that one.
None of us ever know about the technology. We're like, okay. There are a lot of treatment resources, and one of the things that was shared today was, boy, there are a lot of residential programs, there are detox programs, but here's what I think we need to begin thinking about. As long as the focus is on getting someone to a bed, which is necessary in many cases, but as long as our focus is there, we will always be talking about emergency room treatment for a chronic condition. And so as a chronic illness, addiction, and abuse before it becomes addiction really requires something much more robust and substantial. And so what we're doing at Gosnell and what we're advocating with the governor, with Senator Flanagan, who's been charged with the responsibility of looking into this issue, is that it's time to really invest across the spectrum of prevention, early intervention. Addiction treatment has historically been on the sidelines of healthcare, and it's really time for it to come into the middle of medical care so that physicians, health centers, primary care providers are knowledgeable and are working side by side with clinicians who understand this illness. Because as long as we focus on the emergency room for addiction, which is essentially what a detox is, we will forever be creating beds. We've got to start to intervene earlier, and we have to begin to develop and invest in prevention programs that keep people from getting to conditions that require emergency care. On the other side of the agenda, we need to do a lot more to stay engaged with patients after they leave a program. I can tell you that 87% of the patients who go to detoxes in this state have been there before. Over 50% have been there more than 5 times. Most people do very well in treatment. The real challenge comes at the end of an episode of care. And so what we built in this state is a system of episodic treatments. You go to a detox for 5.3 days. You go to a rehab for 24.6 days. You go to a residential program for 50, 60, it doesn't matter how long. At some point, you need to come out of those programs. We don't have really robust systems for engaging with patients after they leave those structures. And so unless you want to build a state hospital system that generally just keeps people in hospitals, we need to do a lot more there. That's where the investment has to go. That takes advocacy and it takes public outcry. Public outcry is what's gotten us to this place, and so it should be sustained. And one other thing before I close. There's very little that's done in the area of research, development, and innovative approaches to care. Gosnell is the largest single site provider in the state of the drug called Vivitrol. It can take anywhere from 3 days to 3 weeks for an insurance company to authorize for that drug to be used. It costs about $800 a month. It's a once-a-month injection. I can tell you that an insurance company will pay for 3 detox treatments a month without question and will challenge the need for a drug like Vivitrol. That's nonsense that has to stop. And so all along the spectrum, research dollars for addiction are practically nil. And for a public health problem that affects 40% of the American population, it's unacceptable. And so that rooms like this should be full because we're all affected. So I would encourage you to keep the conversation going, and certainly we want to be part of that conversation. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Ray. Dr. Mike Bahari.
Yes, I'm here to talk about prevention. Gosnold is very much involved with treatment, as Ray just outlined, but Gosnold also recently developed and opened a prevention department to begin to look at some of the issues Cape-wide and things that can be done to prevent people from going into detox in the first place or getting addicted or being substance abusers at all. The prevention programs here in Falmouth started in 2008 with a grant from the federal government to the town of Falmouth to create a community coalition which was called the Falmouth Prevention Partnership, which I hope many of you have heard of. It's now in its 6th year and is now affiliated with Gosnold. The programs focused on preventing substance abuse in teens and preteens and looked at alcohol, marijuana, and prescription pills, with a greater focus now on prescription pills in the past year, to try and get on top of some of the addiction issues. The partnership has been very successful for 2 main reasons. First, or 3 reasons. One is the ability that we had to put together a coalition here in Falmouth, and as Ray pointed out, this is a very special community. The second was involvement with law enforcement in Falmouth. Many communities that do these kinds of programs do not work well with the police, or vice versa. Here, it's been just the opposite. We've had great interaction with the police and support from the police. The third, and the most important probably, is our involvement with the Falmouth Public Schools. Previous to the current management of the Prevention Partnership, the superintendent of schools was on the committee that ran the organization. And there has been, again, great working relationship with the schools. We're part of the curriculum at the schools. And based on the work that was done in the 5 years, initial 5 years of the program, we actually reduced underage drinking in Falmouth high school students by 13%, marijuana by about 4 or 5%, and prescription pills by about 2 or 3%. And hopefully as that work continues, those statistics will get even better. And through the relationship with Gosnold, these kinds of programs can become available throughout Cape Cod. In terms of prevention, one of the things that we're doing is trying to educate the community about the heroin and opiate issue. As parents, one of your responsibilities is to learn about and have the facts about the problem, and then have an ongoing discussion with your kids about this. Most people, if you ask them who the kids listen to, they'll assume it's their friends, which is true, but more important is the relationship and messages they get from their parents. They may give you the finger or walk out, but they do listen to you. So it's very, very important that you share your concerns and your knowledge with your children, especially preteens and young adolescents. There are great resources for this education in town. The partnership has, if I say so myself since I manage it, an excellent website at falmouthprevention.org, which has a lot of information about all of the drug issues that face Falmouth, as well as access to online and local resources. We also publish a weekly column in the Enterprise called Risky Business, which focuses mainly on parents and adults so that you can be empowered to work with your children and to make some changes in the community.
Thank you, Michael. Next, we'll hear from District Attorney Michael O'Keefe.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being in attendance tonight. It demonstrates something about your understanding that this is, as has been referenced earlier tonight, a community problem. I want to just offer a little perspective on this issue. And Ray Tomasi mentioned it. He alluded to it. This is an issue that began with respect particularly to opiates about 16 years ago. And we're talking about it today almost, or at least I hear it all over the Cape, as if it's something new. About 12 years ago, we had a very similar rash of heroin overdose cases that resulted in death. And back then it was from a form of heroin that was said to be too pure. And so the person who was afflicted with that particular problem would take the amount that they were used to taking, and they would end up overdosing and dying because the heroin was too pure. Today we understand that this heroin that is causing death is a heroin that's laced with fentanyl, which in and of itself is a very lethal substance. And when combined with the heroin, and again, someone taking it in even the normal dose that they usually take, ends up overdosing and dying. But I mention that to give some perspective on it. This problem has been with us for a long time. Now, another thing that I just hope you consider as you try to grapple and reach an understanding of this, there are two sides to this question. One is the interdiction side. That's normally and traditionally the role of the police, and the district attorney's office. Interdiction means we arrest the people who are selling and possessing illegal drugs, and depending on the circumstances, they're put in jail. That's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is prevention, education, and treatment. And, you know, since 1975 or 6, when the war on drugs began, with the creation of the DEA, that federal department that deals with the interdiction of drugs, we have almost the exact same percentage of the population per capita addicted to drugs now that we had addicted to drugs then. So what does that tell you? It tells me that the war on drugs, the way that we have been fighting it, has been a failure. So what do we do? Well, if I had my way, and you may find this to be funny coming from the DA, but the amount of money that we spend on the interdiction side is not matched by the amount of money that we spend on the prevention, treatment, and education side. And we have to begin to do that. And, you know, I have, for example, 18 state troopers assigned to my office. Sheriff Cummings, in his former life, was the head of that state police unit before he was elected sheriff. He knows what I'm talking about. We split that unit in half. Half of them are devoted just to interdicting drugs, and they work with a task force of most of the police departments in the towns throughout the Cape, as well as the DEA and other federal agencies. And they do a pretty good job of interdicting drugs. We just had a very significant raid and series of arrests right here in this town just last week, where drugs, money, and a gun were confiscated. And, you know, for every one of those dealers that's eliminated, if you will, even if it's for only a short period of the amount of time that they spend in prison, some other dealer comes up and takes their place. And why does that happen? Because we're the customers. You know, think of these times that you've read when, you know, a president of Mexico or some other official in Mexico was being chastised by somebody in the United States government, and it was being suggested that they down there in Mexico had to get a better control of all these drugs that were flowing into the United States. Well, I recall, I think it was Vicente Fox when he was the president of Mexico, and he said, "What about you? You're the consumers." So it seems to me that we have to undertake with drugs the same kind of effort that we undertook with young kids and cigarette smoking. I'm one of those people who's still afflicted with that habit. And if I light up a cigarette in front of my little niece, she looks at me like I'm from Mars. And we have to do that with drugs. And we have to start early and preach it often. And if we can do it with cigarettes, I don't see why we can't do it with drugs. But it's going to be an undertaking. It's going to require some effort. And, you know, if I could make any respectful suggestion to you as citizens, it would be any time you run into, you know, one of your state reps or your senator, you know, urge them to undertake what Mr. Tomasi is suggesting, that we start to look at evidence-based practices for how we can get a handle on this problem and not just be finding a bed for somebody to go into get sober, and then get released and go right back to the same behavior. We have to be a little smarter about this. I certainly don't know all the answers, but I'm glad that Ray is sitting down with other experts and that a governor is finally listening. And, you know, Chief Dunn and several other police chiefs on the Cape, with respect to the issue of Narcan, which you've all, I'm sure, heard something about, were, you know, quite a bit ahead of the curve. They were contacting the DPH and hoping to get the regulations within the DPH that prohibited or set up barriers for police to have Narcan in their cruisers. And we were able to get the Commissioner of Public Health to the Cape in March and had a meeting where we asked the Commissioner, remove those barriers, we'll train the police, and we'll get Narcan in every single police car. And that's when the Secretary said to us, why don't we do it throughout the state? And 2 weeks later, the governor declared his emergency, and those regulations are now removed. But again, I emphasize that police riding around with Narcan, they're going to save an occasional life. That's very important. But they're not attacking the underlying problem. That's an issue that has to be undertaken in a much more global sense if we're going to be effective. So keep that in mind when you have an occasion to run into a state rep or a senator. Those are our policymakers, and we have to urge them to look at this problem in a little different light. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Sheriff James Cummings.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you all for coming out tonight. We certainly appreciate it. How do we get here? How do we get to this point? And I think one of the things that happened some time ago that got us here is that in Florida they opened up a whole bunch of pain clinics, and it wasn't to help people with pain; it was to make money. And our folks up around here found out about these clinics, so on a Thursday night, a bunch of folks would hop in a car, head for Florida, hit as many pain clinics as they could in Florida, and then bring OxyContin and Percocet and Vicodin back here to Massachusetts and sell it on the street. And OxyContin was going for like $1 a milligram. So 30 milligrams was $30, and an 80 milligram pill went for $80. So people were making a lot of money. And this went on, and eventually there was enough complaints from law enforcement across the country to the governor of Florida and the federal government that the EA finally did an investigation and closed most of those clinics down and arrested people and seized a whole bunch of money. And what that did is it left a bunch of people who were addicted to pharmaceuticals, OxyContin, Vicodin, and Percocet, with nothing to have. So they bought the stuff on the street for a while, but eventually that started to dry up, and now that's why we have a lot of people now using heroin, because heroin's like $3 a bag now, you know. So it just became what was available, and they were already addicted through the other stuff. So that's why part of the reason why we're where we are at today. About 80% of the people who were sent to the Barnstable County Correctional Facility have some issue with drugs or alcohol. Either they were arrested with drugs, or they were arrested for driving under the influence, or they committed a crime because they were under the influence of drugs, or they were under the influence of alcohol. So we've done a couple of things at the jail to try to address these problems. You know, we certainly have an obligation to try to do something with the folks who are sent to us, to send them back to the community a little bit better than they were when we got them. And all of the people who come to the Barnstable County Correctional Facility committed their crimes on the Cape, you know, and most of them are residents of the Cape. They're all coming back to our communities within a fairly short period of time. So several years ago, when the OUI was a big problem, we started the OUI program in the jail for people who have, usually when they get sent to jail, it's their second, third, or fourth, and sometimes fifth or sixth OUI. So we started the program to address those issues. We've graduated about 111 people from our OUI program over the past several years, and of that 111, over 9 have returned. So that's not too bad. Normal recidivism rate is about 60%. So getting 9 folks out of 111 isn't too bad. We also have an intense residential substance abuse treatment program. And that's a 6-month program. Inmates are kept in a separate housing unit. It's a quasi-military, very therapeutic, community-based program. All of these programs are volunteer. People who finish that program have about a 20% recidivism rate, which again is very good compared to a 62% recidivism rate nationally. Part of our RSAT program and part of our overall reentry program, we started a pilot program using the drug called Vivitrol, which Ray mentioned earlier. What I like about Vivitrol from a law enforcement perspective, it's a non-narcotic. It doesn't do anything else except for deaden the senses in the brain that give you the euphoria from opiates and alcohol. Has no street value, so it's not going to become a substitute drug for heroin. It's an injection. It lasts a month. We give these individuals that are volunteer for the program and that are screened to make sure that they have some opportunity for success in the program. And we give them the first Vivitrol shot before they leave jail, and then we have counseling and programming, and the second Vivitrol shot is set up with one of our community providers, and for the most part, it is Gosnold. We're very lucky here in Falmouth and on the Cape to have Gosnold in our community. It really does a fantastic job relative to rehabilitation. So Vivitrol has shown us great promise. Several other jails in Massachusetts are now adopted the program. We've talked to probably 7 other correctional facilities across the country relative to this, and the Department of Correction is pretty close to opening their own Vivitrol program. So it has great promise, but again, it's just, it's like the diet. The Vivitrol is the pill, but you still got to do exercise and watch what you eat. So it's still important to have counseling and do all of those other things. And believe me, addiction isn't an easy thing to beat. I've had folks who have been in the correctional facility for 2 years, have been doing fine, haven't had any problems whatsoever. And they're within 2 or 3 months of being released, and they tell me that I'm getting close to release and I know it, and I'm starting to dream about getting high. I think it just shows you how these substances take control of the brain and how they really affect people for the most part for the rest of their lives. So these people, addiction is a lifetime event. So it's not an easy thing to beat. There's going to be relapses, but another thing we're finding with Vivitrol is the few relapses that we've had, when they fall down, they get right back up and they want to go back on the Vivitrol because they said it's helped them more than anything else they've done. So I think it shows good promise, and we're tracking it. We're keeping track of the folks that are using it, so hopefully we'll have some good statistics shortly to show us exactly how well the program is or isn't working.
Thank you, Sheriff. Our next speaker is going to be Christoph Pinkowski. He's a Gosnold Counsel and Recovery Specialist.
Thanks, Chief. I'm really happy to be here tonight. I have to say that, I guess my primary function speaking tonight is to give people hope, to let people know in the Falmouth area that you're not alone, and if you have someone that you love, a friend that's struggling, that we're here to help. We have support groups in town. We have one on Wednesday nights in Falmouth at the Gus Canty Rec Center. I will be there tomorrow. So, there's support and there's help out there. And I think hope is really, really important. I have to say that, I stand up here, or I sit down here, a proud man in long-term recovery. And I can say that the Falmouth community has really saved my life, So it's a good community of people. I know that because I came down here almost little over 7 years ago, homeless, sleeping on park benches in Boston, and I thought I was going to die. And the people in this community really has helped me have hope in my heart again, and given me another opportunity to live. I just came back from the doctors. I was with my wife, and she's pregnant, and I remember just looking up on that little screen, and seeing like my little son, like moving around in her belly. And for a guy like me who couldn't stop shooting heroin and was in and out of treatment centers and detoxes and in jails and institutions and shelters, like that didn't seem like that would ever be possible for me. So when I stand up here and I sit down here and say that I'm a really grateful man in recovery, like I mean I'm a grateful man in recovery. Like I'm really grateful. And I came down the Cape. I want to share a little bit about, I know we don't have a lot of time, and Ray knows I can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. But like I said, I'm here to share a little bit of hope and let people know that this condition can be arrested at some point and recovery is possible, that there's a lot of people like me in remission, long-term remission. There's 25 million people in the United States that have this condition that are in recovery. And you don't hear about it a lot because there's a stigma attached to this condition. And I think that's going to change, and my hope is that's going to change. And that's kind of why I do these things to some extent, is because I want people to know that like, I'm proud to be in recovery. And that, like, I thought that in my whole life as a young kid, I thought that I was just a bad kid. I was adopted at a young age, and I was raised by really wonderful, loving, caring people. I mean, there was no drugs, there was no alcohol in my house. When I would come home from school and bring my little report card home, there would be D's on it, and my family would celebrate that they weren't F's. So there was a lot of unconditional love, because a lot of people ask, well, how does addiction come about? And I'm not going to do a big lecture about that, but I want to let you know that I came from a really good, loving, caring home. And I didn't always have a mohawk and tattoos and stuff, Not that makes me a bad person, but I was raised with unconditional love. And, for me, I saw people where I grew up and when they would use drugs and what happened to them. And, like, as a young kid, like, because I see in the paper all the time that people choose this thing. Like, I didn't choose in third grade to I hope that someday I can shoot heroin and live under a bridge and kill myself. That's not what I wanted out of life. That's not what I wanted out of life. I wanted to be a productive member of society, which I am now. But I wanted to, my family, worked really hard. My mother would work as a secretary during the day and then go to work at night as a waitress, and my father would work like 70 hours a week. So, like, my dreams as a young kid was to play sports and to shower them with all the gifts that they deserved, That was my dream, was to play professional sports. I was good at soccer. I made the junior national team when I was 13 and got to travel through Europe, and that was my dream and my goal. It wasn't to shoot heroin and become addicted to drugs. It was to give my mother, like, a really nice house. And it was to give my father, like, one of those really comfortable leather lazy boy chairs, That's what I wanted to do with myself. That's what I wanted to do with my family. And I started using drugs, not because I was in a bad family, not because because I had any kind of trauma or anything. I used drugs because I just wanted to fit in. I want people to like me. And I really didn't know that I had a genetic predisposition that I believe to this condition, which was my mother, my biological mother, was an addict and suffered from this affliction, and she ended up passing away of an overdose. But so when I started using those substances, I opened a door that I really couldn't shut. And so I struggled, and I'm not going to talk all night, but I struggled for a long time, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I failed out of 4 colleges, and the hopes and dreams of giving my family a college education and showering them with gifts, like, at the end, I just didn't know what was wrong with me. And I was in and out of detoxes, and everywhere I went, people would reaffirm how I felt about myself, that I was a bad person, that I didn't have a disease, and it was really difficult. And I remember not feeling human anymore. And I don't know if anyone knows what that's like, but to be living outside and not feel like you're part of the human race, it was a tough place to be. And I came down here at 30 years old and got clean, and I went to Gosnold, and I was homeless sleeping in Boston, and I got brought to this place called Gosnold on Cape Cod, and I really wasn't knowing what to expect. I had been to different treatment centers, and at the detox, which is our hospital acute setting, as I got stabilized, and I got some hope that I could actually maybe do something with myself. And I say this story all the time. I remember sitting in the lobby, and I had like these shredded pants with holes in them, and I was dirty, and I had a big beard, and I had all this crazy long hair, and this guy in a suit came up to me and walked up to me and hit me on the shoulder and said that I was sorry about that, and said that I would be okay, and I went on to our men's residential house, which is called the Gosnold Miller House, which is in Woods Hole. And that place, it absolutely saved my life. It taught me that I had a condition, that I wasn't a bad person. It taught me about self-respect. It taught me about dignity. It taught me about pride. And I learned to heal, and I learned to love myself again. Recovery is a really powerful vehicle. My father, in my active addiction, he got really sick. He got Parkinson's, and people at the halfway house I was at, the residential program, told me that I should probably go see him. But because I had so much guilt and shame, I was really worried about, how am I going to repay a guy that never gave up on me? How am I going to repay a guy that was always in my corner? I was embarrassed. And they suggested to me that I go down and see him. And I was like, well, I want to get him a watch or a nice coat or something. But I had been, sleeping in the woods, so I didn't really have the funds to get him a watch or anything nice. And I had my little 6-month chip, And I remember driving down there and seeing him. And he came down from the apartment, and he was really sick, and he was shaking a lot. And I remember looking at him and telling him how sorry I was, and that how much I loved him. And he looked at me, and we hugged, and I said, I worked really hard for this, and I love you so much. And he told me that I've been praying for you to get off the streets for 10 years. He's like, I've been sick, and I've been really sick over the past 7 months, and I just want to let go. And he's like, seeing you free and clean, he's like, I can finally just let go, and I can sleep. And recovery has just been wonderful in my life. Beautiful. And I remember sitting in the office saying that if I can ever get clean, I want to work for this place, because they do so much good. And I told my counselor, I'm like, if I can stay in remission long enough, I want to do what you do. And I ended up getting my first job at Gosnold washing dishes. And I was a good dishwasher, because recovery taught me to show up early and stay late. And I broke my wrist in 3 places. And I remember coming in, and I was washing dishes with my opposite hand and cutting vegetables. I'm like, I'm gonna show these guys. And I had that spirit, because I realized that I had overdosed 13 times. I had tried to hang myself in jail, and the fact that I was alive in Cleveland was nothing short of a miracle. And so I owe everything. When I went home this weekend, and we celebrated my recovery. My family brought out a cake, and it said, happy 7 years in remission, and then it had thank Gosnold, And I don't say that because I work for the company. I say that because that's been my experiences, is that we do a lot of good. I feel like I've hit the winning lottery ticket working for the company. We do a lot of good, and I'm a product of that. And so, I ended up going back to school, and today I'm licensed by the state of Massachusetts as a substance abuse counselor. I'm certified as a family interventionist. I'm also a recovery specialist with a concentration in young adults addicted to opiates. And I love what I do. And so I've done a lot of different, I'll get to why we're here. And so a couple of different points, and then we'll get into questions, if that's all right by the chief. So intervention work is something that I do, and that's really important. There's been a lot of misinformation in the community that a patient, a loved one, has to be willing. They have to want it. I'm hearing a lot. I work in the community, and I hear a lot of families say they have to want it. They have to want to get clean. And I'm going to share a quick story about, maybe you can understand what it means that forcible treatment works. And the patient doesn't have to be ready. You guys can be ready. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. So we're here tonight to try to make some change. So I remember I'm in my clinical supervision. It's my first intervention. I got the whole suit, the shirt, the tie, the sweater, the shoes, everything. I'm like, this kid's just going to look at me and see the tattoos, and he's just going to hop on my shoulder, and I'm going to be a hero and bring him to treatment. I really thought that that's how it was going to happen, and I did all my studying, and so I'm sitting down, and it's out of state, and the fireplace is crackling, and they're like, the grandmother's there and the dogs and everything, and they said, we're ready for you to go get my son. So I went upstairs and knocked on the door, and I said, time to come out, so-and-so. And he said, I ain't coming out. So I opened the door, and he slams the door in front of me, and then he runs out of the house. He throws his keys at my employer, and the grandmother starts crying. The dogs are barking, and I'm like, I don't remember this being in any of my studies at all. So then what do? I just start running. I start running like Reggie Lewis down the street. Not knowing what I'm doing, I'm like, I'm probably going to get fired. I'm in it this far. I'm getting this kid, And so I run and run and run and run and run. And then he dives into the woods, and I'm running. I roll my ankle. Now I'm limping. I got a really nice sweater with the crocodile on it, and I tear the sweat. My wife's like, you got to look professional. The hair's enough, the tattoo's enough. They're not going to take you serious, So I got the sweater, the nice crocodile sweater, rip the sweater, roll my ankle, get out into a clearing. The young man proceeds to pick up a log. I'm like, oh my, he picks up a log, so I'm like, I pick up a log. I'm like, if we're going to dance, he's going to go on my shoulder. I'm bringing him to treatment. And this isn't sorry, Ray. I don't even know if Ray's heard this story. He's probably going to fire me afterwards. Yeah, so I'm looking at the paper. I'm thinking, like, what am I supposed to do? In my mind, I'm thinking, I don't remember this being in my clinical training. I don't know if I made a mistake here. So he looks at me. He's got the log. I look at him, and I'm like, and he drops the log, and he goes up the hill with me, and we go to treatment. And he didn't want to be there. He's a young kid. He didn't want to be there. This is really important because a lot of people think that they have to really want to be in treatment. And so this young man proceeded to go to treatment, and every single day I pulled in the parking lot, right? He was up with his bags packed. I'm going today. This place stinks. I don't want to be clean. I'm too young to be clean. I'm like, you're not too young to die. I'm too young to be clean every single day for at least 2 weeks, every single day. And the one day I go, and he's not there. And I go in his room, and I'm like, what's the deal? Your stuff's not packed. And he sits me down on his bed, and I said, well, what happened? And he said, something funny happened to me. He's like, I woke up early in the morning to use the bathroom, and the sun was coming up over the cranberry bog. And I started to think that maybe I can stay clean and maybe recovery is a good thing. And he got a positive point of reference being in recovery and being in treatment. Now, recovery has the ability of a powerful ability to change the family system. Now, stay with me. So I worked with the family for an extended period of time, and I studied. Know your family history. I studied their family history. I did multiple genograms, and I came up with a few things with this patient. I looked at his father's side all the way back to World War I. They had a pattern in the males. When the male came back from the war, he detached from the family from post-traumatic stress and started medicating post-traumatic stress with alcohol. And that happened in World War II. And that happened all the way down the line to my current patient. something traumatic happened to my current patient's father when this kid was young, where he detached from the family. And how the mother kept the family together was she cooked a lot of food. And in that process of the mother trying to keep the family together and cooking all the food, the patient gained weight and gained a lot of weight. So then when he hit high school, people started making fun of him, and he started medicating with alcohol. And then he started medicating with opiates, with Oxycontin. And then he was a young man shooting IV heroin in high school. And we learned a lot. And this is the beautiful part. Now this young man is in recovery. And something traumatic happens to his father. Something traumatic happens to the family again. And the father does what generation after generation after generation does. He tries to detach himself from the family system. But because it takes one person in recovery to change the dynamics of future generations, this young kid in recovery, when his father decided to detach from the family, he came and he grabbed his father and brought him back to the family. He brought him back. Now he's a young father, this young kid, so that he has gotten the ability to change the family system. So recovery is such a powerful vehicle that he might change the dynamics. It takes one person. So recovery is possible. And I could talk, and I'm not going to keep talking. But and I didn't even get to our new program that, yeah. So I got all this stuff. I'm sorry, Chief, but if you're struggling out there, there's help. Please reach out. Please come to the meeting tomorrow. I'll be there. I'll leave my cards. If you have any questions, please call, email, and thank you.
Thank you. As you've just heard, it's what I said to the people that were calling me before. It's not just the police department's problem. We need everybody's help to do it. But I just want you to know that the police department is working to help. We have a captain who is a full-time partner with the police department's a partner with the Falmouth Prevention Partnership. But I have a captain that's assigned to it directly to work with them all the time. So we keep that flow going, like Dr. Bahari says. We work well with them, and they work well with us, and we appreciate that. We have the kiosks in the police department, and I'm happy to say yesterday I think we took in, or this weekend, was like 347 pounds of prescription drugs. That's what we have off the street. So when someone, God forbid, breaks into your house, they're not stealing your drugs, your kids aren't taking the drugs, and things like that. So that was huge. We've also trained our officers, as the district attorney said. We met, and I have officers trained in the use of Narcan, so we don't have to wait for the fire department to show up. Because right now, all my officers can do is CPR until the fire department get there. And we're fortunate in Falmouth to have a fire department in every corner of Falmouth. And like I said, we had 12 overdoses, and out of the 12, we only lost 2 people. So, that says a lot for the fire department, too. So, those are some of the things that we are doing proactively in the police department, and I'm in the process now. Again, as you saw in the paper, we arrested 11 people last week, all drug-related. They were drug addicts and drug dealers. So, what I'd like to do now is open it up to the floor for questions, because I'm sure you have questions, and this is the time to get your questions answered. So we have a microphone up here. All I ask is you come up to the microphone. Yes. Could you come up to the microphone, please?
Good evening. My name is Carmina Mock Muñoz de Luna, and I have the honor to teach yoga at the Gosnell, Emerson House, and Cotomet. And I know some of the people here in the panel, and I am very happy to heard your story, Christoph. I think since you were in hell, you are now perpetually in heaven, and it's such a blessing to be close to you. So 2 points that I want to make. First of all, I have the feeling that the parents and school should be doing a lot more to restore the feeling in our kids and grandchildren, in my case, of the uniqueness of who they are, that they don't need to be the fastest, the funniest, I would say, exaggerating the limits of our personality to be accepted or loved, that what we bring to the world, if we are truly ourselves, is good enough. But we are now in a very competitive society, so that's very difficult for all of us, most of it for kids. My second point is the link between athletes in our schools and surgeries and the amount of painkillers related to opium that are prescribed to our kids after surgery. I myself had a kidney stone 22 years ago in North Carolina, and I was treated, believe it or not, with acupuncture, and it did work. And it's not as offensive as Vicodin or whatever you are prescribed to use. So my point is, could we convince doctors to be a little more conservative about prescribing people heavy drugs, and most of it athletes? Some of the kids don't have any emotional problems, but they have surgery, and they take those medicines, and then they are done. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'm speaking from several perspectives, one being the parent of Corey Gilmartin, who died in the town of Falmouth on January 24th, after suffering many years of opiate addiction, and our efforts over those years to help him find appropriate treatment. And also being a primary care provider in family medicine for the last 20 years on the Cape. This is the town I was born in, grew up in, and now it's the saddest place on the planet for me. I don't live in Falmouth anymore, I live in Truro. But my experience has been, being a primary care provider, that my hands are tied very often when I'm trying to seek access to care for people, fighting with insurance companies to get people where they need to be, and the access to care when people need it. So I'm speaking from that perspective. I have experienced both sides of the spectrum, but the difficulties even just trying to take care of people who need care. I spend hours on the phone fighting with insurance companies to get access for admission. I can't imagine somebody in crisis spending time like that on the phone to get care or to get bed access when they can be on the street in 3 minutes and get a $3 bag. It's very frustrating. Primary care providers are under horrible pressure to see a gazillion patients a day now. So to take the time to deal with a family in crisis, to deal with a patient in crisis, to really take the time to screen adolescents, it's difficult when you've got 12 minutes allotted for a visit that you know it's going to be 40 to 60 minutes. The pressures are terrible. And I can tell you, I have worked with providers who don't even ask the question because they don't have the time to answer the questions or help with access. This is a critical problem. And it's just as disturbing to me listening to the radio talk show, Radioheads, where you have people calling in and say, well, those are people that made bad choices, so why should I spend my tax dollars taking care of them? Not understanding Two things. Number one, this is a community problem that leads to increased crime in our town and community, from thefts and break-in to the rise in hepatitis C rates on Cape Cod because of our drug addicts, and the complete cannibalism of our families because these addicts eat their families whole, live. This is a community problem. And part of it is an identification problem because there are still people who believe that an addict is some poor street person, person of color, person of minority, some urban poor person. It's not your grandson, your son, your nephew, your child. The real face of addiction has changed. This is us. It's all of us. It's people who are young, people who are old. It's people who are white, people of all color, persuasions, and most importantly, of all social classes and economies. And until we eat that and acknowledge that and are willing to support, like you say, the funding for legislation to cover better health care. If we're going to legalize marijuana, the tax money should be spent on addiction care and access to care and education programs. Legalizing marijuana that went over $400 a bag, well, geez, it's cheaper to be on heroin than to smoke pot. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, the problem is so huge on so many levels that we're crushed with the problem. That is not, this isn't a recent crisis. This problem's been going on for years. And unfortunately, sometimes people have to die for people to wake up and smell the coffee and start to be active. And this, absolutely, this communication has to go on. Now, my concern about legal enforcement is that I don't understand when a death occurs on the scene, why aren't the police called to the scene to protect evidence? That's my first question. My second question is, we have a law. It was written by Tip O'Neill back in the Len Bias days to go after the dealers when a death results. Why aren't prosecutions happening? Because when you use that law, in the states that use that law, like Oregon and Minnesota, when they use the law, and those people know that for that type of unintentional homicide, there's a 20-year sentence, you can put pressure on dealers, you can put pressure on people to rat. And why these dealers live in our community unattended. They just live in our communities, and people know they're living in the house next door because they see the cars going all day long, and nothing happens. It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating.
Your points are all very valid and very well taken. One of the things that I said in my brief remarks was how important I thought it was that we really began to link up with primary care providers to work to do better identification and early interventions when we can have great success in helping keep people from getting into deeper difficulties. The system that we presently have makes it almost impossible to do that. We've launched a program, it's been running for about a year now, where we have clinical folks that are in primary care practices, a few of them, and most recently teamed up with Dr. Talbert at the Falmouth OBGYN to have a clinical person in that office, not only to try to intervene with folks who have been identified, but begin to identify folks who are not being screened well. Partly because a lot of other healthcare providers and medical professionals are not inclined to ask those questions. They're not sure how to ask them. It's awkward, it's difficult. But those are opportunities we have to help folks make modifications and adjustments, to intervene earlier. And that's why, you know, the great stress that we're trying to put on that piece of the puzzle is very challenging. We found some foundations and some donors that are willing to support it as a research and development effort, an innovation, if you will. But the present system of how care gets paid for, or the absolute absence of any dollars that are set aside for research and development of best practices, is shameful. Certainly the medication issue is huge, but also the way we do the treatment, and we wait until it's necessary and urgent, so that we get between I think between 750 and 1,000 calls a week. Almost every one of those calls is a call of urgency. You can't treat a chronic illness by waiting for it to get to stage 3B and 4. You've got to do something before people get to that place. And, you know, I recognize what Michael said or in his remarks. This is not something that's brand new. So we're not surprised. But we can do a lot better. We can do a lot better, but it's very difficult under incredibly complex and frankly maniacal regulatory systems that don't make it possible for innovations to be brought into this field. And so that treatment providers are left with what exists, and they keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, because that's what we have. We've got to open it up.
I'd like to, Chief, address a couple of points that were raised by Mrs. Gilmartin. On the Cape, you know, if you look at the voter totals for ballot question 2 in 2008 and the medicinal marijuana referendum question just recently on the ballot in 12, overwhelming vote to pass both of those things. There were a few entities within our society that fought against that, the district attorneys across the state, back when the movement was, let's decriminalize marijuana for everything under an ounce. What kind of message do you think that sends? Do you think it's a good message? But 70% of the people voted for it. Now, I certainly don't feel that I have the qualifications to opine on the benefits of medical marijuana, but I know a lot of doctors who tell me that there are none. And yet the same people who are in favor of using brain research and the development of the brains of young kids to raise the age of juvenile status so as to relieve kids of criminal responsibility, because the brain research tells us that their brains aren't fully developed until they're 25. Those same folks want to ignore the brain research that says even the casual use of today's marijuana changes the physiology of the brain. I find an incongruity in that. Now, the next vote you will have an opportunity to take on this issue, I respectfully suggest, will be in 2016, when the ballot question will be the complete legalization of marijuana. And I hope that people on the Cape and all across Massachusetts really think about that. And before, I used to think, we don't have a chance of defeating that. But now we're starting to understand a little better, number one, the deleterious effects of that harmless drug on the brains of young children. And we're also starting I think, to understand that it's not the same marijuana that was around when I was a kid. The THC content of this stuff is 3, 4, and 5 times what it was back in the day. So if you have an opportunity, again, reflect on whether or not you think it's a good idea for the adult community to signal to kids that we think this is okay. Because one thing I'll suggest to you, not every marijuana smoker, certainly, turns out to be a heroin or an opiate addict. But virtually every single opiate addict started out smoking marijuana. So please join me in opposing that law.
I just want to address the piece as far as the investigation piece. A lot of these overdoses we don't even hear about because people are calling the ambulances and calling the paramedics. We are working with the fire department, but what happens when they get involved with the hospital, it becomes HIPAA. Or when we go to the scenes are completely cleaned up by either family members or by the other users that were there. But when there is evidence to investigate, we do investigate. Go ahead.
It all sounds good, so forgive me if that sounds, cocky. I've been waiting since this morning for tonight, unless you include waiting for the rain date, which was an act of God, out of our control, and I've been waiting, let's say, 2 years for an opportunity such as this. I won't get into why that is, but whereas I sympathize with the hold and the grip that drugs and alcohol have on an individual, can have, oftentimes does, I think that, and this young man had mentioned the need for hope. I too believe in hope, or need hope. I think we all need hope. We want it, we need it. What I'd like separate or in addition to that is accountability and repercussions and I'm searching for another word that means the same. That's what happened to me when I stepped out of line when I was a juvenile. And I look at it as it was by grace that it happened. I have plenty of opportunities to share my story on what we call commitments in a program of recovery. About halfway through what I'd like to say. I think it's very easy to overlook somebody who enters the doors of a recovery facility, or rather for them to be seen as, to be granted immunity, to be granted a get-out-of-jail-free card. And I think we have to, I think we can agree that we need to form an alliance. We have to be on the same team, and I believe we are. And I think we're going to need another forum such as this. And with that, I'm going to be on my way. And there's work to be done out there.
It was very informative. I picked up on what Mr. Tomasi talked about, the need for insurance companies in the Vivitrol. I am a pharmacist, and what disillusions me, and my question is things like Suboxone, with the availability of the doctors to give it out. I understand why, but I don't know of a program that follows up with that. I just see people coming in and in and in to get Suboxone, and it's not the same. Like, Vivitrol is not a narcotic. Suboxone has some abuse potential to it. So again, we're on this side of things, treating the the emergency, so to speak. But there's no step from there to counseling. I'm not sure if they're supposed to be following up with counseling. I think that's very important. A follow through with just putting a Band-Aid on something, you know, and there's money to be made. You know, doctors, laboratories to follow up with it is big money, and I think it's being thrown at the wrong thing. This Vivitrol, I think, is a big thing, and I'm going to make a call to my rep or state senator, and you know, and I think we should do that too. There's things that can be done, and Band-Aids are being thrown, expensive Band-Aids, where that money can be put in a more positive area. And that's just my experience and my concern. Thank you.
About the Suboxone, it is a narcotic, and it does get on the street. Unfortunately, there are several private practices where there is no controls and no follow-up, and it is a money-making machine. But on the Cape, there are a number of community health centers, including the Community Health Center of Cape Cod, which I think serves about 100 patients with Suboxone. They have their own pharmacy. You can't be in the program unless you are have ongoing primary care services and be part of their behavioral health program. So some of these programs are well run. They do the follow-up. But some of the programs are not.
A friend of mine who was a medical director at a VA hospital, I used to call him when I had questions about medications, and I remember something he said to me one time. I called him and asked him about a medication. He said, "Ray, hurry up and use the new medication while it still works." And what he was saying is very relevant to, I think, the incredible naivete of the Department of Health and Human Services, and particularly the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, when a number of years ago they determined that opiate addiction could be treated in a physician's office. The idea was sort of not a terrible idea. Let's try to engage the medical community. Well, there's this medication called buprenorphine, or Suboxone, which can be given by a doctor. Doctor takes an 8-hour course. He gets an X code in front of his DEA number, and he can give Suboxone out. The recommendation was that the patient also be involved in counseling and sort of thing that we all know works. The naivete was that that's pretty much what was going to happen. It didn't. It really hasn't. It's happened in legitimate organizations and physicians' offices that practice with integrity. But too many doctors are giving Suboxone without monitoring, without the requirement for for counseling. They're using it as a cash business. It's not unique to this area. It's all over the country. What it really did, though, when the federal government says opiate addiction can be treated in an outpatient primary care or specialty practice office, is it sends a message to the insurers. And that is, if the federal government thinks that this condition can be treated in a doctor's office, then why does someone need to go to a treatment facility? Why does someone need to go to a detox? You can be detoxed in a doctor's office, put them on Suboxone. And so we have what we have today. We have very few people on Suboxone anymore. We've moved many folks to Vivitrol, but Suboxone does work for some people. I know folks that have been in recovery for 6 or 7 years. Yes, they're taking a medication, but there's also, these medications have been stigmatized in our community and sometimes in the treatment community. That medications that assist, these are medication-assisted treatments. They're not medication-only treatments. And so, given the nature of this illness and how little we really know about how to treat it in a very unique and individual way, and how to match patients to specific types of care, we need to use every resource we have. So some folks probably should be on methadone. We're not a methadone provider, but some people need to be on methadone. Some folks maybe do okay with Suboxone, and some people do well with Vivitrol, some don't. But we're in such a primitive place with these medications. I would suggest that in the next 5 to 10 years, medications like Vivitrol and Suboxone will be viewed the way we now view mercurochrome. Do you remember that? You don't remember. Most of you don't remember that, but because the advances that are being made with pharmaceutical companies that have drugs in the pipeline that are specifically targeted for helping addicted individuals, it's going to change the face of addiction, but we need to move much more rapidly.
Can you hear me? Yeah. My name's Alexandra, and I'm an addict in recovery. I was fortunate enough to make it through Gosnold and through Gosnold at Katomet, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without the help of my community. I'm a Mashpee Wampanoag woman. My concern is the prevention piece of it. I know I wasn't prepared to do drugs and alcohol. I was never taught that it was dangerous. I didn't become an addict until I was 23 years old, after I was married and after I had kids. And it was because I didn't know any better. At that age, when everybody thinks, you know, oh, she's 23, she can drink, she's got kids, she's married. I had my whole life together, and I threw it away because one day I decided to take a pill. The thing that they helped me most with at Gosnold at Katomet was how to talk to my kids. My kids are 4.5 and 7 years old now, and they know about drugs and alcohol because Gosnold at Katomet gave me the tools to teach them that it was dangerous, that it was a disease, and that they not only had the genetic markers for it, but if their father did, that they would be even more likely. I have a 4-year-old now who every day reminds me, I'm so glad you don't do drugs and alcohol. And I wouldn't have that if it weren't for Gosnold at Katomet. I feel that these prevention meetings are so important, and not just for people this age, high school age. This needs to be in elementary school. This needs to be 7-year-olds, 6-year-olds. I can't explain how when I pull an eyelash off my son's face, he wishes that his dad would stop doing drugs and alcohol so he could meet him at the library again. That breaks my heart because I don't have an answer for him. All I know is that if I keep teaching him the way of recovery, the way that I was taught, that hopefully one day he won't walk the same path that we did. I guess my biggest question right now is how quickly can we get this into schools to share the message of recovery? And also, what do I do when I get a phone call saying, I relapsed again, I just walked out of Emerson House for the 4th time, and I have nowhere to go except to a house where everybody is using. My biggest concern is, where can I send people that I love and that I care about to have sober, safe housing until a bed does open up? That's my question.
We have a couple of things in place right now. I mean, I actually probably two or 3 years ago, we started going to these dances, elementary school dances, and I would stay downstairs and actually talk with some of the young guys and young gals and kind of do a little education one-on-one, and we would fill out surveys and so forth. Last week, I went to, went to Barnstable High School, I went to Cape Cod Tech. We're going and speaking at the Boys and Girls Club in Mashpee tomorrow. And really what we've been working on as of late, and I think Ray touched on it, is our new young adult opiate treatment program. What we've seen over the years is that young patients do really well in an inpatient hospital setting. But when they leave, they have a hard time translating the clinical information that they learn in an inpatient setting. So what we started to do about 2 years ago is we started to kind of create a new program called Recovery Coaching, where it was really hands-on, and a patient that I did an intervention on, he was in the community, and I was seeing him 3-4 times a week, and we were talking on the phone 7 days a week. I was working with his family. I was working with his counselor. I was working with his PHP. I was working with his therapist. I was taking him to meetings. I was going fishing with him. I was taking care of his dog, I think. But we saw that the extended engagement with the patient really worked, the hands-on engagement. Because when you have someone that young, that has to accept on a deep level they have a condition that's going to be with them the rest of their life, and they're 19 years old, it's tough. All their friends, 19 years old, 20 years old, all their friends still drink and use drugs. So we're asking this population to make such a comprehensive change in 7 days, in 30 days, in 90 days. I mean, this early recovery for us is 2 years. I mean, I remember getting a surgery, and after I was in the remission, I was in remission in the recovery room. When I left there, I had follow-ups. I had appointments. I had physical therapy. I had all these pieces in place. But in treatment, a lot of times patients will leave after 7 days, and then that's it. And I watch these young 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds run around the community having no idea what it is, how to treat their condition and what to do. So we've seen that over the past couple years, it's worked. We've gotten to actually take 30 patients snowboarding over the winter time, and actually I took one of my patients kayaking last weekend, and we go bowling, and we start to show this young adult population that there's life after the use of drugs. And we try to graft, because a lot of these young people still have a positive point of reference on using drugs. A lot of them do. So we try to get a new trigger, which is a positive point of reference that being in recovery and being clean is a good thing. And we encourage that, and we work with their families. And I'm sure when I get home, I'll be talking to 3 or 4 of my patients, asking them how their day was. Someone might run into crisis, and I might get up at 1 in the morning and drive to their recovery house and figure out how we can help them. We work together in a team. We got to hire a few more employees. We've had about 50 or 60 patients, and we see that extra extended engagement really works. So, yeah.
Schools and prevention, the partnership has been working very closely with both the Falmouth schools and the Mashpee schools for a number of years. And one of the newly funded Gosnold programs is to put counselors in schools. I think there are 5 now, or 4? How many? 4.
By the fall, we'll be in 10 to 12 schools across the Cape.
And this is not only to intervene with kids who are at high risk, but also begin to work with the kids who are not at high risk and with faculty to bring some of these educational components about drugs into the schools. The other thing is that one of the most important things for youngsters is to be involved in what we call pro-social activities. And these are activities in the schools or in the community, such as volunteering, being involved in sports, anything that's not antisocial, essentially is pro-social activities. In Falmouth High School, we have a great program called Jack's Pact, and I think Samantha is here tonight who started the program. And this is a program that was named after Jack Pearsall, who was killed by a drunk driver in Mashpee after a 4th of July celebration. And his family and his friends started a program in Falmouth High School. And these are kids who pledge not to drink, not to take drugs, not to drive if they're inebriated. And they sign a pledge, and they also raise money for scholarships. So these are keeping these kids involved in a pro-social activity. Nationally, there's a well-known program. Many of you may have heard of Chris Herron, who's a promotional speaker who was a Celtic and was an addict, and he's in recovery. And through him, there's an organization called Project Purple, which is very similar to Jack's Pact. There's a program in Mashpee High School that the partnership helps support, and there's several other programs on the Cape.
You know, Alexander, I do want to say we we actually placed our first ever counselor in an elementary school about 3 months ago. 2 days a week. It's in the Mid-Cape. She was there 2 weeks, and they said, can she be there 3 days a week? And she's been there 2.5, 3 months, 2.5 to 3 months, and they said, can she be here 4 days a week? So it is, we're getting there. And the other good thing, of course, Chris has talked in all the high schools on the Cape. We're very happy that in one of them particularly, we now have almost 20% of the high school, one particular high school, is now enrolled in the Project Purple program. And so part of this has to do with beginning to influence the school culture that, exactly, that clean and sober is okay. It's a shift in the kinds of things. I remember the first time we went to this school, there were half a dozen Project Purple kids there, and Chris said to me, come on, man, you got to buy some of these purple shirts and give them to these kids. It's all about the shirts. But we were there in the fall, and Chris kicked off a program with us, and there were 50 kids who wore purple shirts. The last count I knew, we had 118 kids in that school, in that high school, who were wearing purple shirts. And so the good thing about that is it is possible, when the tide begins to roll, it is possible to change things that right now seem, to a lot of people, very hopeless.
Hi, I'm Sarah Maria Allenby. I come with a couple of hats. I am the VIPS building coordinator at East Falmouth Elementary School. I am the PTO vice president, and I do keep an eye on the kids, and that's the whole point. This is a community issue, and I report things that I do see to the school adjustment counselor. As a parent, I grew up in this town, and when I first moved back to Falmouth and to my tiny quiet circle, the drug dealers moved across the street in 2 houses. And as a neighborhood, we got together and we had a neighborhood watch, and we got together and we had 0 tolerance for the traffic and what was going on. And Falmouth Police Department, I will say, was amazing at helping us, deal with that issue. I feel badly that they had to move out into another neighborhood in the town of Falmouth. The other hat I put on is Ray and Gosnell did some amazing training for clergy here in Falmouth that I think should continue. And I think that Christoph and any number of people should come in the pulpit, because that's where you have the captive audience of the brother, the sister, the aunt, and the mother, and the friend, and the family to speak to understand prevention, to understand how we can really help out families in this town.
Hi, I would like to support decriminalization of small amounts of drugs only because I believe that our prisons are overflowing with people who have maybe minor afflictions, and they are drug abused, they need treatment, they don't get treatment in prison, and I also think our prison system in the nation has become mega multi-million-dollar business, and I don't approve of that. I also wanted to say that I support legalization of marijuana only in the regulation piece has to be in place first, because I would like to see the taxation and all of the money that is gained from it go toward treatment. Most people who are using drugs are self-medicating in their mental illness and addiction and things that need to be treated. So I would like to have some legalization, but the money go not toward the profiters, but to go toward treatment. I work in the community and have worked with multi-generations of family recently. A grandmother. I work in early intervention, so the 3rd generation, the grandmother of the little one, had dealt with the mom's addiction for 10 years since adolescence through early adulthood, and finally was asking for help to get the woman some treatment. And when we tried to find the avenue toward that, we're told that to pink paper her would mean that if there were a bed open, she could go directly into treatment, but otherwise would be held in a prison. And the grandmother just wasn't willing to do that to her daughter. She would not have her be incarcerated while she waited for a bed to be available. And so she gave up, and so they will go on for years and years further until a greater crisis is met. Hopefully there will be a bed available, but I don't know. Another instance I had recently was with a family I'm working with, and this was someone in recovery and was red flagged at a pharmacy, and she got her grandmother's prescription for painkiller and went right in and got it filled, and although she gave her name and she was red flagged, it was given to her. And I don't know how that system is supposed to work, but obviously it is failing. So these are just instances that I know from our local community, and so.
Just voiced. However, let me suggest that you have to work very hard to go to jail or prison in Massachusetts. And the notion that there are nonviolent, low-level people languishing in jail for small amounts of drugs is simply a myth. If you look at the criminal records of those who are sentenced to jail and prison, there invariably is a long criminal history, as well as an accompanying charge, whether it's a gun charge or a house-breaking charge or whatever else. There are very few people that are in prison in Massachusetts solely for drugs. And at the time of the decriminalization of marijuana in 2008, do you know what the penalty was for a young person possessing marijuana? It was a continuance without a finding. There was no jail penalty. You couldn't put a young person in jail for a small amount of marijuana. Mind you, the idea of this incremental legalization of drugs is just that. It is a plan to legalize drugs. And if we want to have that debate as a society, I'm all for the debate. But let's be honest about it. George Soros, who funds in Massachusetts these drug initiatives, started out in 2006, some of you may remember, with an attempt through the ballot question process to legalize cocaine. And that didn't fly because, people they're afraid of cocaine. Marijuana, that's harmless. So the next iteration, the next incremental step was ballot question 2 in 2008. Let's decriminalize a small amount. Then it's medicinal marijuana, and in 2016, as I referenced earlier, it will be the complete decriminalization of marijuana like Oregon, Washington, Colorado. And one of the ironies of this is, as the United States is marching down this road to decriminalization, Holland, the Netherlands, are walking it back because they've turned their countries after 15 years into a nation of young potheads. If that's what we want to do in this country, fine, let's have that debate. But let's have it armed with the knowledge that people aren't languishing in prison just for drugs, armed with the knowledge that the THC content in marijuana changes the physiology of the brains of kids. And if that's what we want to do, give the imprimatur of the adult community that this is fine, then let's be honest about that debate. Thank you.
of rehabilitative programs at the Barnes Correctional Facility. I'd invite you to come up and take a look for yourself.
Well, on that same note, Judy McManaman, I'm a probation officer in the Falmouth District Court. Just since the legalization of marijuana, now I've had 2 presentations of certificates from probationers who want us to know that as soon as the clinics open up and are legalized here, they've been given certificates for medical marijuana. And when asked why they are being served with these certificates, the answer is for anxiety. And I just want people to understand that, number one, opiate addicts have a very low tolerance for pain, for one, and any discomfort for another. So, you know, we could all be on medical marijuana because I think we all suffer from anxiety. But I don't necessarily believe it's a great thing. Secondly, what we've been seeing at Falmouth District Court, and I think in courts across Massachusetts, is that yes, this epidemic has been going on for the last 16 years, but in the last 6 to 12 months, it has exploded. I mean, exploded exponentially. And so as we lose staff in the court, we're gaining more cases. And when we get cases coming out of court that I have somebody sitting down to sign up for probation, and the charges are breaking and entering at night with intent to commit a felony, breaking and entering in the day with intent to commit a felony, larceny over, larceny less, shoplifting. My first question to them is, what's your drug of choice? Because those are all drug charges. Those are all, it doesn't need to say possession of heroin with intent to distribute to be related to drugs. But my question for Ray is, I know, Ray, that you've talked often about addiction being a brain disease, and what we see at Falmouth also is, and courts across the state, and we've heard tonight, is that the shortage of beds. And we have the ability at times to get people into the detox, the 3 to 5 day, which ends up being like a spin dry. And certainly the longer that somebody can stay in a structured treatment program, like a Reflections that High Point runs, which is a court alternative program, and then the WATSI program, the Women's Addiction Treatment Program, and the MATSI Men's Addiction Treatment Program. I think the statistics might prove that those programs have a longer or a greater success rate, in other words, a reduced recidivism rate over a period of time. And we certainly miss the old Gosnold TSS, where people could wait to get into long-term treatment, and we're wondering if there's any kind of play being made with the legislature or these committees that you're on to try and get some more longer-term treatment or some holding facilities for people to get into those longer-term treatment facilities.
I think that certainly there's serious discussion about adding capacity to the system. I think if the capacity that's added to the system is restricted to beds, then we're not really giving, I think, fair due to the nature of addiction. I dare say that the regression rates for patients who are in programs of 30-day length or 60-day lengths or 90-day lengths are probably not terribly dissimilar. I think that certainly being able to match patients to levels of care to enable them to gain or gather the internal resources and the community resources in place for them to stay in remission are important. And we need to have that across the board. The meeting this afternoon was focused very much on that. But I hearken back to my comments, and I said this to Senator Flanagan when I met with her a few weeks ago. If all you do is add beds to the system, if all you do is put more beds where people can be committed against their will, what you will effectively do is create a state hospital system for addiction patients. This has got to be more than a detox is an emergency room for addiction. It's a place where folks are medically stabilized and safely brought through withdrawal. And if it's done well, it's done in 4 to 6 to 7 days. That's what a detox does. A program that's a rehab program or a transitional program of 3, 4, or 5 weeks certainly does some good, but it cannot stop there. And I can't say this enough, because I go to Emerson House and I see there's 38 patients at Emerson House. There's a dozen staff people there. And I talk to young women there, and they have support that is unparalleled for a women's program in this state. And I listen to them, and I listen to their experience and how great they feel. And part of my brain then shifts to the day that they walk out of Emerson House, when suddenly they don't have 45 people who are there at every turn to say, how are you feeling today? You don't look so good today. I've been in the places that they go after they leave, and sometimes it's to a family. Often it's to independent living. And I think about a woman who's in a place where she has incredible support. And what is it like to fall off that cliff the day you leave there? Why isn't there a comprehensive, robust system of support for that woman when she leaves there? You know, I would guess that for most people, the most gain that's made in a longer-term inpatient residential program happens probably in the first 40 or 50 days. After that, you get better, but the line starts to level out. What happens when you walk out of there? It's not enough. It's not, and it's not just for the women. It's for the men too, and it's for the folks who say, I never felt as good as I do today. This program has done so much for me. Alexandra's not rare, but certainly exceptional in that she has found apparently resources in the community, supports. That's why what Christoph, we picked Christoph to do this recovery coaching thing about 1.5 years ago. Last month we hired our 6th recovery coach. It's not reimbursed. There's no insurance system that reimburses it. Yet in the 60 folks that have been through that program, now it's about 1 year, the reduction in returning to detox, that in that group has been reduced by 70%. Rehab by 90%. They're not going to rehab. And even the ones who have setbacks, and people do have setbacks. This is just like any other chronic condition. A year after you get an acute treatment for diabetes, 50% of the people will require another treatment, another acute treatment. It's the same for addiction. Yet we blame the patient, doesn't want it, or we say treatment doesn't work. I think our hospitalizations, I think we've had 1 hospitalization in this group of 60. And these are all 18 to 28-year-olds who live on the Cape, right? 1. The year previous, 11 hospital admissions. 4 are back in college. How do we keep this thing going? I mean, you know, we're scrapping around, going somewhere, writing little grants, trying to get money. We've gotten good support for it. But that's where we need to do the investment. Even those who have setbacks, and Johnny, who tracks that stuff for us, less than 72 hours, they're back in a stabilization setting. Maybe it's the detox, maybe it's outpatient, maybe it's something else. So even the young people who are having regressions and are resuming use. We had one young girl who was in the detox a few weeks ago. She said, my God, I picked up at 8 o'clock. By 2:30 in the morning, I was being brought to the detox. It's not even worth it. Absolutely. Now, you know, these guys are working 24/7. So, sure, we need beds. But my dream is to be able to someday say, just like with Randy Hunt and his Assist Act, boy, we don't need as many prison cells. We don't need as many detox beds. We now have something that really attends to the biggest public health problem that this country faces right now, that affects 40% of the American people, yet is the most misunderstood, the most undertreated, underfunded, and underrepresented. And I got to tell you, it's only, you running this year? It's only because of the tragedy now that you have suddenly everyone is, you know, concerned. And that's good. We're glad that that's happening. So you know, we get very passionate about this because, I don't know, we're just passionate about it.
I just have one other question, Ray. Do you think, because what we're also seeing, as you know, is that Suboxone is becoming a drug of abuse, because it's not time released in the system like Vivitrol, because you can't give it an injection in that way. The Suboxone people that get it legally are selling half their prescription to their heroin addicts, so then the heroin addicts have a supply so they don't get dope sick, and they're trading off. I had a first probationer the other day that showed me his arms and said he is now taken to crushing and injecting himself with Suboxone to get high. So
well, we're admitting patients to the detox to detox them from Suboxone. And Suboxone is very difficult to get off if you know, but I mean, and certainly that's happening, and that's a tragedy, and let's not forget that there are some folks that are doing pretty well with it, but it's a problem. Diverting it is a problem.
I'm wondering, though, if there's any talk with any pharmaceutical companies, or if there's any possibility that that could be manufactured in injection, because I know that some people cannot take the Vivitrol because they do the test with naltrexone pills and they're allergic to it, so they have to take Suboxone if they want any kind of medication supplementation. But, you know, that's what we're seeing.
There is some, maybe actually in Europe, I'm not sure, a subcutaneous form of it where it's injected under the skin and it time releases out over a period of time. I think they're looking at that. I mean, one of the reasons they went to the film was to, you know, avoid the problem of diversion and also cheeking the medication, storing it.
And is the film Subutex, or is that Suboxone also?
Suboxone.
Oh. Thank you.
I mean, that's what we use we use Suboxone in the detox for 3 days, three or 4 days. Our problem is because it's an opiate and you can't begin taking Vivitrol until all opiates are out of your system. There's for anywhere from, they say 7 to 10 days. I mean, we've done it even 5 to 7 days. Is that you have a little bit of a donut hole where the patient is you know, being discharged from the detox, but they haven't been off of, you know, they're not, the opiates aren't out of their system in order to be able to start the Vivitrol, and that's a struggle we have with the insurers. The insurers are going like, we're not going to cover any more time. The guy's detoxed, and we're saying we just need like 3 or 4 more days to get him to the next place. Probably save you another detox, but that's a whole other forum.
Thanks, Ray.
Hi, everybody. My name's Richie, and Christoph and Mr. Tomasi saved my life. I crawled into detox 3 years ago, and but today I'm working for Gosnell at the Miller House. Education is, I believe, the most important thing in recovery. And I told my kids are, I have a daughter 22, a daughter 20, and my son's 17. They don't do drugs. I told them when they were little, if you don't start, you'll never have to stop. And that's worked out. Although they saw me for many years suffer with this disease, they listened to me. I was in the Bronx a year and a half ago at a fellowship meeting, and a little 12-year-old was speaking, and he had both of his arms amputated from intravenous drug use. He was 12. He said, "My mom lied to me. She told me there was no such thing as a boogeyman." So parents, don't lie to your children. Tell them that there is a boogeyman, and it's a disease of addiction. It might save their life. And at that age, it is so important to get that message across. You know, law enforcement, they're doing their thing. When I was in the Marine Corps, I fought the war on drugs. Although I fought the war on drugs, I wasn't educated about the disease. I fell victim to the disease. I went to Miramar California military rehab, the first thing they said was, Marines, you have permission to surrender. Surrender your will and be willing to learn what this disease is about, because you cannot kill this disease with superior firepower. It's through education and higher power. Is the only way out. We have that here in Falmouth. We have Gosnold. We have Miller House. We have Emerson House. We have Katamet. We have the education part. As far as Gosnold is concerned, we have the education part covered. But in the schools and at home, it has to start at home. You know, and we have to, us parents, we know about it, but we have to let our kids know just as much about it as we know. My father was a doctor in substance abuse. He just said to me when I was a little kid, just say no. That's it. That's all. When I was 12 years old, my dad took a picture of me running over a hurdle, a lawn chair in the backyard, because I was going to go to the Olympics one day. Well, that picture saved my life 3 years ago, February 1st, 2011, because I had a gun to my head, and I was looking at the picture. Pictures, I was about to pull the trigger. The picture said, please don't do this to me anymore. Please stop picking on me. So it was out of the mouths of babes, just like that little kid in the Bronx who said his mom lied to him. It was me in that picture at 12 that said to me, please don't do this to me anymore. The gig was up. So I did it for the kid. Parents, do it for your kids. You tell them the truth about this. Gosnell has what they need, what addicts need in active addiction. They might not have, you know, they don't have everything certain people want, but we have what they need. And Gosnell saved my life. I respect the law enforcement. I know you guys are doing, in the courts, are doing everything you can to fight this this situation, but it's through education. Through education, I call patients at the Miller House students. I get in trouble for that a lot, but I don't call them patients. I go, we have 25 students on deck, you know. But because through education, that is the way out. As long as there's a demand, okay, the drugs will keep on coming in. So if we get this education to the kids at an early age, and what's early? However old they are right now, that's when we get them, no matter how old they are, you know. So they don't have to suffer. If there's a demand, it'll keep on coming. We can't fight this with superior firepower. It's through education. And that's all I've got to say. Thanks.
I usually wimp out doing things like this, so. But I've been sitting here thinking and sitting on my hands and saying, don't get up, don't get up. But I have to get up because I am concerned for our country, I'm concerned for our state, I'm concerned for my town, and I'm concerned for my family. And, you know, I was sitting here thinking about all the things that over time in my life with addiction that I've learned. And I grew up in an alcoholic family. My father was notorious in the town that I grew up in, unfortunately, for many reasons. And throughout his life, he became notorious being sober because he didn't care who knew about him being sober, that he went to AA, but he displayed his life in a different light. He got sober because he went to a detox in 1984. That wasn't like the super popular thing to do. There weren't a trillion detoxes in 1984. There were hospitals you went to. And he taught me a lot of things about life, but they weren't all things that I was ready to use at the time. So as a teenager, I was mischievous, etc. But I stand here today, I'm 45 years old today. I haven't had a drink or a drug since I was 16. And I used to be really private about it. I'm becoming increasingly unpopular among the teenage community in Sandwich because every one of my children's friends know my stance on addiction, and I talk to them. And it's kind of funny because yesterday a couple things came full circle for me. I was talking to my sons, and I said, oh, so-and-so probably doesn't like me because I'm talking to them about all this stuff. And they say, no, Mom, you're the bomb because you're real. Let's start being real with our kids, you know? It's such a struggle. There's so much genetic predisposition, and there's so little community education. This is a rarity, isn't it? You know, but we're all here because we want to be educated, you know, and with all due respect, and so you know a little tiny more piece about my difficulties in life. My husband is actually a resident at the Barnstable County House of Correction due to the disease of addiction, and every bit of it. Criminal activity, addiction related. Sweetest man you'd ever want to meet, can't get out of his own way if he picks up a drug. And on Friday nights and Sunday afternoons I visit, and I sit in your waiting room respectfully, and I talk to people, and I tell them about addiction. And I also have to respectively let you know that I disagree with your 80%. I believe that your number is probably more like 99%. Of the residents there that have had experience with addiction or within their families, or but I'm very hopeful, like Christoph. I feel great hope because I think of the amount of people here today. 20 years ago, there wasn't even a room to sit in to talk about this stuff. So I think we're moving in the right direction. I would love to be a part of any efforts that any of you have to make, and I appreciate your involvement in my family's life. Maybe not totally, but but you know what I mean. I really, I just really think that there should be so much more available, and truthfully, the lobby doesn't have any literature there on addiction, and that's, to me, a shame. So maybe you and Mr. Tomasi and a couple of these guys can hook up and put some stuff out there. Thanks.
Things that the last two speakers spoke about. It is extremely important to talk to your kids, and if you have problems doing that or don't know how to do that, if you go to our website, falmouthprevention.org, there's a whole section on parenting, and there's a number of articles that will tell you step by step how to talk to your kids appropriately about drugs and alcohol, and it's age related. So how to talk to a 5 to 8 year old and 8 to 12-year-old, etc.
Christoph, first of all, praise God for your testimony. That was really awesome, and I know you're going to be a blessing to others throughout your counseling career. So praise God for your effort. I just want to say, we're all parents. We're all victims of this drug. What we're experiencing in our town, our community, on Cape Cod and nationwide. You know, whether we have a family member that's addicted or know somebody, you know, one way or another, we're in it because, you know, as a community, you know, I don't know anybody, or at least family-wise, who's addicted, but I'm a victim of the drug because I was robbed. And believe me, that's about the last thing I thought that was going to happen to me here in Falmouth. And you know, that's one of the things that's part of this, you know, the society that we're living in. You know, it's a drug that's induced by, you know, wanting, having and needing more. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, sir. It starts here as a father. It starts as a parent. You have to educate your children that drugs are awful. They kill, they destroy families, they do everything that we as a family society believe in. So you need to teach your children as a parent that drugs will kill people and they will destroy families. And I don't think there's anyone in this room that can attest or deny that. It will destroy families. And Mr. O'Keefe, I applaud you for, continuing the effort to keep drugs off the street and not legalize marijuana. If people want to smoke pot with their kids at home, shame on you. I don't even know why we're even talking about that, because it's going to be cocaine, it's going to be PCP, it's going to be, come on, what other drugs do we want to legalize? And until your family member gets hit head on by somebody who's on drugs or alcohol, you're not affected by it, and that you don't really care about it until it really affects you. But I think everybody in this audience is being affected by this particular drug or knows somebody that's being affected by it. So I think we need to do the right thing in that. So again, Christoph, I applaud you for standing up and just having the faith to move forward with, your life and getting back on track. But as a parent, we're the bottom line. We're the teachers, and it has to do, and we do need to teach this educationally in the schools. I know some of you are, have your hands tied in doing that effort, but as a parent, you need to teach your children, you need to teach your grandchildren, if it applies, but we need to be the educators. We can't rely on the panel that sits up here. We're parents. We need to be bold enough to stand up for what we believe in. I appreciate your effort and your time here this evening, and that's really all I have to say.
My name is Milan. I'm a sophomore in high school, and I just want to add on to the educating in schools and stuff, because I know personally, when I see people talk about their drug addiction and stuff, it hits my heart. I'm a emotional person, but I see other people, they don't have an effect by it, just by someone talking about it, they're like, oh, that was boring or whatever. And I think it was last summer I got an opportunity to go with the church to a program called the 99, and it was room after room after room going in to see what it's like to have a drug addiction. And we saw heroin addicts and crack addicts and their behavior and what they look like, and we experienced what it was like. And I think more hands-on stuff like that is more powerful, because like you said, we're young, our minds aren't fully developed, so just talking to us doesn't really process in some of our brains. We're not all mature. So I just feel if we could do more hands-on stuff like that, you could prevent it more. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rebecca. I'm a nurse at Cape OB, Dr. Talbert's office. Thank you. Ingrid is doing a wonderful job helping the patients get set up with resources in the community. And there's been a lot of stuff on the news and the paper about babies, born addicted to, whether it be street drugs or Subutex. And, the babies are innocent and they do suffer. But the moms also suffer with this a lot. They don't want to be in this position, and it's difficult because it's not safe for them to completely stop using drugs, during the pregnancy. And when we first started getting them in, we would tell them, try and get them to primary cares who had a license to distribute Subutex, and it got to the point where 2 of our physicians actually got X licenses, and now they are prescribing, because these patients would come to us in crisis saying, I'm taking, 6 Percocet 30s a day, and now I don't have the money and I can't afford it, and I know it's not good, to detox. So, we needed something to help them. So our doctors did that. But Emerson House is wonderful. They help a lot of our patients, and I do agree that we do need a step down, from Emerson, to help them get along, without a great support system right at their disposal. Many of these women come from families that also deal with this, and it's hard for them to try and be clean and sober when their environment, that is full of people dealing with this same problem. So I know that people, are very sad for the babies, and they do suffer, but the moms also suffer too. So let's not forget about them.
My name is Beverly Costa-Ciavola. I'm a longtime resident. I grew up here in Falmouth. Thank you, Ray, and all the rest of you for your presentations tonight, and for anybody that got up and spoke. I run a small nonprofit here on the Cape that does family support work, and one of the things that I do is I run groups for grandparents raising grandchildren, and 90% of the grandparents who have the grandchildren in our groups have them because of drug addiction. And of those 90%, probably 95% of them started using drugs because of mental illness. And so I think that we need to look at, we need to start looking upstream because that's what prevention is all about. We tend to be a reactionary instead of a proactionary community. That's not just us, it's our nature, because we don't want to believe that something's happening in our own backyards, but it is, and it's going to continue, and it's going to ebb and flow just like it has. It's big drug problems when I was a kid, and then you didn't hear anything about it for a really long time, and it rears its ugly head again. I agree, that we need to talk to our children, but it's not just about talking to our children. I have lots of friends who have children who are drug addicted who did not bring their children up to be drug addicts. I think Christoph is a great example of that. He said he had wonderfully supportive parents who didn't, and his goal in life wasn't to grow up to die underneath of a bridge. I also do a lot of suicide intervention and prevention work, and I'll tell you that the lost survivors and the attempt survivors that I talk to, many of them bring up the issue of addiction and mental illness and the stigma that those things are associated with, and how hard it is for them to come out and talk about it, because it always comes back to being their fault, their problem, and not the problem of all the rest of us. Well, that's not the way it needs to be. We need to stop making blame and just look at the problem and say, it's time to do something about it. We all need to be proactive. We need to look at prevention. And that's how we're going to be able to take care of this problem. Thank you again for all you do.
Well, that was quite a bit. And very informative, I believe. And I believe we will have another forum. I think we're all in agreement. We're not going to solve it all here tonight. We can't. It's a first step. Get people talking, get the dialogue moving. That's how we're going to solve this problem. So we will have something later on in the fall. I'd like to thank the panel, please. They did a great job. And I definitely want to thank all of you for coming tonight. Take time out of your time. It's important. And it was a very decent crowd. I also would like to thank the Superintendent, Bonnie Gifford, and Principal Driscoll for allowing us to use this great facility. And we're going to move on. But don't leave, because you all got raffle tickets when you came in. We're going to let you leave with something. Sure. The Prevention Partnership has a lockbox for the prescription drugs. So see if there's a winner here. $562-135. Some people have left, so don't run away yet. 135. No? $562-054. 054. We have a winner. Again, thank you very much, and I appreciate it, and I hope you got some information that you needed. Thank you.
pictures, I was about to pull the trigger. The picture said, "Please don't do this to me anymore. Please stop picking on me." So it was out of the mouths of babes, just like that little kid in the Bronx who said his mom lied to him. It was me in that picture at 12 that said to me, "Please don't do this to me anymore." The gig was up. So I did it for the kid. Parents, do it for your kids. You tell them the truth about this. Gosnell has what they need, what addicts need in active addiction. They might not have, they don't have everything certain people want, but we have what they need. And Gosnell saved my life. I respect the law enforcement. I know you guys are doing, and the courts are doing everything you can to fight this this situation, but it's through education. Through education, I call patients at the Miller House students. I get in trouble for that a lot, but I don't call them patients. I go, we have 25 students on deck, But because it's through education, that is the way out. As long as there's a demand, okay, the drugs will keep on coming in. So if we get this education to the kids at an early age, and what's early? However old they are right now, that's when we get them, no matter how old they are. So they don't have to suffer. If there's a demand, it'll keep on coming. We can't fight this with superior firepower. It's through education. And that's all I've got to say. Thanks.
I usually wimp out doing things like this, but I've been sitting here thinking and sitting on my hands and saying, don't get up, don't get up. But I have to get up because I am concerned for our country, I'm concerned for our state, I'm concerned for my town, and I'm concerned for my family. And, I was sitting here thinking about all the things that over time in my life with addiction that I've learned. And I grew up in an alcoholic family. My father was notorious in the town that I grew up in, unfortunately, for many reasons. And throughout his life, he became notorious being sober because he didn't care who knew about him being sober, that he went to AA, but he displayed his life in a different light. He got sober because he went to a detox in 1984. That wasn't like the super popular thing to do. There weren't a trillion detoxes in 1984. There were hospitals you went to. And he taught me a lot of things about life, but they weren't all things that I was ready to use at the time. So as a teenager, I was mischievous, etc. But I stand here today, I'm 45 years old today. I haven't had a drink or a drug since I was 16. And I used to be really private about it. I'm becoming increasingly unpopular among the teenage community in Sandwich because every one of my children's friends know my stance on addiction, and I talk to them. And it's kind of funny because yesterday a couple things came full circle for me. I was talking to my sons, and I said, oh, so-and-so probably doesn't like me because I'm talking to them about all this stuff. And they say, no, Mom, you're the bomb because you're real. Let's start being real with our kids. It's such a struggle. There's so much genetic predisposition, and there's so little community education. This is a rarity, isn't it? But we're all here because we want to be educated, and with all due respect, and so a little tiny more piece about my difficulties in life. My husband is actually a resident at the Barnstable County House of Correction due to the disease of addiction, and every bit of it. Criminal activity, addiction related. Sweetest man you'd ever want to meet, can't get out of his own way if he picks up a drug. And on Friday nights and Sunday afternoons I visit, and I sit in your waiting room respectfully, And I talk to people, and I tell them about addiction. And I also have to respectively let you know that I disagree with your 80%. I believe that your number is probably more like 99% of the residents there that have had experience with addiction or within their families. But I'm very hopeful, like Christoph. I feel great hope because I think of the amount of people here today. 20 years ago, there wasn't even a room to sit in to talk about this stuff. So I think we're moving in the right direction. I would love to be a part of any efforts that any of you have to make, and I appreciate your involvement in my family's life. Maybe not totally, but but you know what I mean. I really, I just really think that there should be so much more available. And truthfully, the lobby doesn't have any literature there on addiction, and that's, to me, a shame. So maybe you and Mr. Tomasi and a couple of these guys can hook up and put some stuff out there. Thanks.
Things that the last two speakers spoke about. It is extremely important to talk to your kids, and if you have problems doing that or don't know how to do that, if you go to our website, falmouthprevention.org, there's a whole section on parenting, and there's a number of articles that will tell you step by step how to talk to your kids appropriately about drugs and alcohol, and it's age related. So how to talk to a 5 to 8 year old and 8 to 12-year-old, etc.
Christoph, first of all, praise God for your testimony. That was really awesome, and I know you're going to be a blessing to others throughout your counseling career. So praise God for your effort. I just want to say, we're all parents. We're all victims of this drug. What we're experiencing in our town, our community, on Cape Cod and nationwide. You know, whether we have a family member that's addicted or know somebody, you know, one way or another, we're in it because, you know, as a community, you know, I don't know anybody, or at least family-wise, who's addicted, but I'm a victim of the drug because I was robbed. And believe me, that's about the last thing I thought that was going to happen to me here in Falmouth. And you know, that's one of the things that's part of this, you know, the society that we're living in. You know, it's a drug that's induced by, you know, wanting, having and needing more. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, sir. It starts here as a father. It starts as a parent. You have to educate your children that drugs are awful. They kill, they destroy families, they do everything that we as a family society believe in. So you need to teach your children as a parent that drugs will kill people and they will destroy families. And I don't think there's anyone in this room that can attest or deny that. It will destroy families. And Mr. O'Keefe, I applaud you for, you know, continuing the effort to keep drugs off the street and not legalize marijuana. If people want to smoke pot with their kids at home, shame on you. I don't even know why we're even talking about that, because it's going to be cocaine, it's going to be PCP, it's going to be, come on, what other drugs do we want to legalize? And until your family member gets hit head on by somebody who's on drugs or alcohol, you're not affected by it, and that you don't really care about it until it really affects you. But I think everybody in this audience is being affected by this particular drug or knows somebody that's being affected by it. So I think we need to do the right thing in that. So again, Christoph, I applaud you for standing up and just having the faith to move forward with, you know, your life and getting back on track. But as a parent, we're the bottom line. We're the teachers, you know, and it has to do, and we do need to teach this educationally in the schools. You know, I know some of you are, you know, have your hands tied in doing that effort, but as a parent, you need to teach your children, you need to teach your grandchildren if it applies, but we need to be the educators. We can't rely on the panel that sits up here. We're parents. You know, we need to be bold enough to stand up for what we believe in. I appreciate your effort and your time here this evening, and that's really all I have to say.
My name is Milan. I'm a sophomore in high school. And I just want to like add on to the educating in schools and stuff, because I know personally, like when I see like people talk about like their drug addiction and stuff, like it hits my heart. Like I'm a emotional person, but like I see other people, they don't have like an effect by it, like just by someone talking about it, they're like, oh, that was boring or whatever. And I think it was last summer I got an opportunity to go with the church to a program called the 99, and it was like room after room after room going in to see what it's like to have a drug addiction. And you know, we saw like heroin addicts and crack addicts and like their behavior and what they look like, and we like experienced like what it was like. And I think more hands-on stuff like that is more powerful, because like you said, like we're young, our minds aren't fully developed, so just talking to us doesn't really like process in some of our brains. We're not all mature. So I just feel like if we could do more hands-on stuff like that, you could prevent it more. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rebecca. I'm a nurse at Cape OB, Dr. Talbert's office. Thank you. Ingrid is doing a wonderful job helping the patients get set up with resources in the community. And there's been a lot of stuff on the news and the paper about babies, you know, born addicted to, you know, whether it be street drugs or Subutex. And, you know, the babies are innocent and they do suffer. But the moms also suffer with this a lot. You know, they don't want to be in this position, and it's difficult because it's not safe for them to completely stop using drugs, you know, during the pregnancy. And when we first started getting them in, we would tell them, try and get them to primary cares who had a license to distribute Subutex, and it got to the point where 2 of our physicians actually got X licenses, and now they are prescribing, because these patients would come to us in crisis saying, you know, I'm taking, you know, 6 Percocet 30s a day, and now I don't have the money and I can't afford it, and I know it's not good, you know, to detox. So, you know, we needed something to help them. So our doctors did that. But Emerson House is wonderful. They help a lot of our patients, and I do agree that we do need a step down, you know, from Emerson, you know, to help them get along, you know, without a great support system right at their disposal. Many of these women come from families that also deal with this, and you know, it's hard for them to try and be clean and sober when their environment, you know, that is full of people dealing with this same problem. So I know that people, you know, are very sad for the babies, and they do suffer, but the moms also suffer too. So let's not forget about them.
My name is Beverly Costa-Ciavola. I'm a longtime resident. I grew up here in Falmouth. Thank you, Ray, and all the rest of you for your presentations tonight, and for anybody that got up and spoke. I run a small nonprofit here on the Cape that does family support work. And one of the things that I do is I run groups for grandparents raising grandchildren. And 90% of the grandparents who have the grandchildren in our groups have them because of drug addiction. And of those 90%, probably 95% of them started using drugs because of mental illness. And so I think that we need to look at, we need to start looking upstream, because that's what prevention is all about. We tend to be a reactionary instead of a proactionary community. That's not just us, it's our nature, because we don't want to believe that something's happening in our own backyards, but it is, and it's going to continue, and it's going to ebb and flow just like it has. It's big drug problems when I was a kid, and then you didn't hear anything about it for a really long time, and it rears its ugly head again. I agree, you know, that we need to talk to our children, but it's not just about talking to our children. I have lots of friends who have children who are drug addicted who did not bring their children up to be drug addicts. You know, I think Christoph is a great example of that. He said he had wonderfully supportive parents who didn't, and his goal in life wasn't to grow up to die underneath of a bridge. I also do a lot of suicide intervention and prevention work, and I'll tell you that the lost survivors and the attempt survivors that I talk to, many of them bring up the issue of addiction and mental illness and the stigma that those things are associated with, and how hard it is for them to come out and talk about it, because it always comes back to being their fault, their problem, and not the problem of all the rest of us. Well, that's not the way it needs to be. We need to stop making blame and just look at the problem and say, it's time to do something about it. We all need to be proactive. We need to look at prevention. And that's how we're going to be able to take care of this problem. Thank you again for all you do.
Well, that was quite a bit. Very informative, I believe. And I believe we will have another forum. I think we're all in agreement. We're not going to solve it all here tonight. We can't. It's a first step. Get people talking, get the dialogue moving. That's how we're going to solve this problem. So we will have something later on in the fall. I'd like to thank the panel, please. They did a great job. And I definitely want to thank all of you for coming tonight. Take time out of your time. It's important. And it was a very decent crowd. I also would like to thank the Superintendent, Bonnie Gifford, and Principal Driscoll for allowing us to use this great facility. And we're going to move on. But don't leave, because you all got raffle tickets when you came in. We're going to let you leave with something. Sure. The Prevention Partnership has a lockbox for the prescription drugs. So see if there's a winner here. $562-135. Some people have left, so don't run away yet. 135. No? $562-054. 054. We have a winner. Again, thank you very much, and I appreciate it, and I hope you got some information that you needed. Thank you.
Excuse me.